Empower Radio presents Simple Steps, Real Change with Cheryl Maloney and Kenny Brixey. You'll find inspiration, support, and simple steps to help you on the path to a better life. Simple steps lead to real change. Here are your hosts, Cheryl Maloney and Kenny Brixey.
Do you spend your days being who you really are, or do you put on a mask because you think you need to be someone else? Do you worry that if people knew the truth about you, that they wouldn't like you or love you? On today's show, our guests are Marilyn Hough and Chuck Schmitt, the relationship specialist, and it's all about becoming authentic. Welcome to Simple Steps, Real Change. We're excited to have Marilyn and Chuck back on the show. And if you would like to call in and join us, the phone number is 248-809-3475. Again, it's 248-809-3475. Or if you don't want to be on the radio with us, you can send me an email at simplesteps@me.com. Again, that's simplesteps@me.com. So, Kenny, when did it occur to you that being real was more important than what people thought of you?
I'm not sure exactly when that happened, but what happened was one day I woke up and it felt like I was a chameleon. I realized that I was putting on the mask that appealed to whoever I was going to be around, and it changed from day to day and from click to click, and that was real frightening. And I think that was my wake-up call, and it took me a while to figure out exactly what was going on and what I was doing and how I was going to change it. And but that was the one instance that I remember something needed to change for me. How about you?
Well, you know, it's funny, as you're saying that, my first thought that comes to my mind is, man, how do we keep track of all of those personas that we try and be for whatever the situation is? And I'm a big fan of know your audience, and I think that's really important. But I think that it took me until I got out of the corporate environment to say, wait a second, I did what I needed to do and I was the person that I needed to be, but that really wasn't me. Mm-hmm. And that was probably my biggest wake-up call. And at that point, I'm well into my 50s, and it's like, oh, if we can help people get there quicker or before they get so far down their lives that they're not enjoying their authentic selves, they're not really enjoying being the people that they're here to be.
Yeah. And one thing that I just want to add here is that this is ongoing, and you and I talked in our call that we had earlier today about an instance that I realized yet again, just like 2 days ago, where I was putting on this mask. And that is, the first lesson was 25, 30 years ago, something like that. I mean, a very long time ago. And even knowing it for that long today, or yesterday, I guess it was, I realized that for me to ask for help I didn't have to put on that facade of being the guy who can do it all.
Yeah, Superman.
Yeah, and that hit me yesterday. Even though I've dealt with that in other areas of my life, I caught myself doing it again. So it's this mask thing kind of sneaks in on you. So you got it's an awareness thing that you've got to constantly be in connection with so that you can stay authentic to yourself.
As I sit here, when Simple Steps started in the first place, part of it was to say, I need people to know they're not alone, and the only way to do that was to strip down all of those masks and all of those facades that I had built up around, the perfect job, the perfect house, the perfect husband, the perfect everything. Okay, my husband's still perfect. That's another story. But I had put all that together, but when I came to Simple Steps, and we've had this conversation before, people either think I'm incredibly stupid or incredibly smart, because who I am and what I am is out there for everyone to see. I don't have those facades up anymore because, one, I can't keep track of them. And the other is, what you see is what you get. And that has been a rude awakening for me, but probably one of the best things that I know I ever did in my life, because now I don't have to remember what I told one person or another, or what persona that I put on for the situation. It's what you see is what you get. So I think that's, for me, it's humbling, and it's also one of the best things that I could have done for me. And I think my husband, I'm not sure, Jack would have to weigh in on that one.
Yeah, and I think that you find when you do that, I think you find that the friends that stay around are the true friends.
Well, and that's very true. And on that note, I'm going to bring in our very dear friends, because when I moved up here, Marilyn and Chuck, and Marilyn first and then Chuck, have become very dear friends to us, and they are the epitome of the real and authentic people. So for those of you that haven't heard Marilyn and Chuck before, they are the relationship specialists. They're both licensed counselors and life coaches, and they help their clients embrace their authenticity in their own lives and relationships. And, it's just a cool blessing to have them down the street and to meet them and talk to them in person, because they are truly two people that what you see is what you get, and they're as honest and forthright as anybody that I could ever have in my life, and such a blessing. So Marilyn and Chuck, welcome back to the show.
I think I'm going to come on every day just so I can hear that introduction. That's great. Thank you, Cheryl.
Oh, I love you guys.
And vice versa.
Welcome back, guys.
Thanks, Kenny.
Hi, guys.
It's just, this is such a fun show that we have when you guys come on, and if we could do this more often, we would. But you're really busy because you're helping people. You're helping people find their authentic selves.
Yes.
Well, so tell me, as you're talking to your clients, and I know there's not a one size fits all, what do you find the biggest fears are that they have about showing who they really are?
That's a good question. I think it's the fear that you're not going to be accepted or loved for who you are. And as I was listening to you guys talk just now, I thought it was really interesting, because I think we're born feeling pretty good about ourselves. Little kids don't care if they spit out peas, but they like the peaches, or, they cry because they want attention. They don't care. And then sometime, I think maybe around school age, where where you're getting feedback maybe from your teachers or from other kids at school that you don't measure up, or they're looking at other ways that people do things, they start questioning. And I think especially today it must be just so hard to be a kid where you've got so much input from, TV, internet, magazines about how we could be better, what could we do to be better? You've got just that constant barrage. Even shows like American Idol or the X Factor, where they're judging you, judging how you look, how you sing, how you perform. Nothing ever measures up. It's not good enough. And I think that's really hard for people. And I love what you said, Kenny, about I think it's constant. I don't think we ever reach a point where we're authentic. I think it's a constant. Every day you wake up and notice some area where you might not be being exactly yourself, where you're worried about, oh, oops, that wasn't me. I just said that because I wanted her to smile or be happy or like me, and that's really not how I feel. I wish I could take it back,
Yeah. I had someone demonstrate their version of this to me, and they had a rose, and the rose was covered with layer after layer after layer of this black clay. And the black clay was all of the things you just mentioned here. That they're not lovable. They're not smart enough. They're not adorable. Whatever the layers are.
Right.
And growing up is a process of, once you make this awareness and start looking for that perfect authentic self, it's a process of peeling these layers back.
Yeah.
And so it's that just fits. That's what popped into mind as you were talking there. What are some of the layers that you haven't mentioned here? I mean, we've talked about some, but I'll rephrase the question. How is unlovable? How big a part do you think that is in the relationship end of the real you?
Oh, you want me to? Okay. I'm thinking. I think it's huge. I think more and equally as important. You just kind of try to you always want to live up to your partner's expectations. So what happens, I think, is that you meet somebody and you see somebody and you think, oh, and you find out all about them, and then all of a sudden you want to match yourself to what they might like, kind of adopting their likes and dislikes just to be pleasant. You don't want to start out with, well, I'd love to take you to a movie. Well, I don't go to movies. I want to go to the races or whatever. And you don't do that. You're like, oh, yeah, I love horror movies, and just close my eyes the whole time I'm there. But, well, but we do that. I do think that we do that. I see that with clients all the time. They take on, oh, yes, I love football or drag racing or whatever it is that their partner likes, and they really don't. And so, and their thought is, if I don't do that thing, they're not going to like me. And then it just becomes a habit. You kind of don't go through the stage unless you work on it. That I'm going to take some of that back now. I really don't like football. I'd rather go for a walk, or like Chuck and I, where it's like, honey, I don't really want a steak, sushi. I really love sushi. Can we go out for sushi tonight? Or the bigger things, where you live. I mean, that's a good one. Or the car you drive, or any of those things that we might hide who we are. I mean, think about people that hide big things, big values of theirs, like religion. Well, sure, I can live with that until they try it, or children. I want children or don't want children. And then, when they're married, well, I really didn't want that. I don't want children. Oh, well, that's kind of a deal breaker for me.
Yeah.
I mean, there's huge things. So you're right, Kenny. There are the different layers. There's like foods and the way you look, but then there's also your values. I mean, what you believe, what you stand for, how you want to live your life. And people lie about those things, too, for the same reason.
Well, let me ask a question. As you're saying that, because I hear this a lot. I don't like what my husband wants to do. But some of that, somewhere along the line, has to be compromise. I mean, you have two people that have very diverse interests, but they've come together because there are some commonalities. So there is some blending of that, though, too, isn't there?
Well, yeah, there's a huge difference between compromise and sacrifice.
Oh,
I mean,
good point.
sacrifice and not being who you are, putting on a mask is one thing, but compromise, did you want to talk about that, Chuck?
Well, I was reminding you of the football example where this is the time when a lot of people watch football.
Oh, yeah,
a lot of guys watch football, and a lot of wives are understanding, and they know that it will be over, but we've heard there's some resentment, and it's as if, oh, you've made this decision that for all of fall, every Sunday we're going to sit in front of the TV, and so I just have to swallow it. And one of the things that we might suggest to people would be, maybe there's a compromise. Maybe if he's going to watch football on Sunday, he'll agree to go to a swap meet or an antique show or just for a walk on Saturday, so that there is some kind of acknowledgement that it's not a sacrifice, but it's a compromise, and in the compromise, both people win, so where's my part? But you have to speak it, and we find a lot of people who won't speak that, and it's for fear of being judged, fear that they're going to get anger back, fear that they're not going to be approved of in some way. And that's a big deal for a lot of people.
Wow, and I sit here and listen to what you're saying and go, that kind of fear in a relationship, is that real? I mean, is that really a relationship? I mean, obviously it is. It's two people coming together, but it just has no balance in it. If someone is afraid that their partner will not like them or love them because they don't want to watch football or they don't want to go to the coast, they'd rather go to the mountains. I mean, that's a very strong emotion to have.
Mm-hmm. I'm going to throw a different slant on this and see if anybody agrees. Is this a fear that the other person will not like them, or is this a fear that I'm not good enough?
I think it's both, and the not good enough is I won't be accepted for who I am. Those are those messages that Marilyn was talking about where we as a child, we were very happy and outgoing, and all of a sudden, no, don't cross the street, no, don't put your hand on the range, no, you have to do your homework, no, you can't go play, no, you have to go to bed, you can't stay up, there's just no. And
or look at Jack, he likes football, he doesn't sit around playing video games all day. Look at Susie, she skates beautifully. Look at. So it's not always what you're doing wrong, but the focus of attention where it's going.
Yeah.
So I do think it's both.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Well, how do you get your clients to realize that if they're not being the authentically you, they thought their authentic person, their real you? You know, we use this word authentic all the time, and I'd rather just say the real you. It's simpler. Mm-hmm. How do you get them to understand that if they're not being real and true to themselves, their happiness is really on the shaky ground?
I think you hit it on the head. They can tell exactly by whether or not they're happy. Yeah. And if they're not happy, they're not getting what they want. And if they're not getting what they want, are they speaking what they want, or are they just swallowing it? And it's a real easy kind of way to check in and see if you are being authentic. Your body feels either good or bad. And if you're feeling good, you're being the real you. And if you're feeling bad, something is not going right. Something is not, you're not getting what you want. The way you can work that out is you figure out what you're not getting, and then you flip it and you say, well, what would it be like if I were getting it? And then ask for it. So back to football, I feel really bad. I know we've been watching football every fall for the last 15 or 20 years, but I don't like this feeling, and I don't know why. Oh, because every Sunday is locked in. I need to say something. Well, there's going to be a fight because it's been 15 to 20 years. But being authentic, I need to say it, and I just need to believe that the person that I chose as a partner will respect the fact that we need to have a conversation about this and figure it out. And the part about clients realizing that finding happiness is kind of a clue to their authentic self, I have a really quick story about a client, and it's a little odd, but he went to a movie by himself. It was a guy movie. He was sitting there, and then a couple in the back were talking really loud and laughing, and the woman might even have been on the telephone, and he started getting really angry, and he thought, well, I could go get the usher, and the usher would probably come in and tell him to quiet down, and they would quiet down and then start laughing as soon as he walked out, or he could turn around and, either ask them or yell at them to be quiet. And he knew that that wouldn't have a good effect either. So all of a sudden a thought popped up into his mind, I could go sit next to them, and I think they would get the message. And so what he did is he went up and sat right next to him, and the guy kind of freaked out a little bit, and he said that the guy said, what did he say? He said, what are you doing? And my client answered, I'm trying to listen to the movie. And then he got all upset, and he said, you're invading my personal space, and you're disrespecting me. You need to go back down to where you were. And my client didn't say anything, and the guy paused for, 15 or 20 seconds, and then he said, the guy came back in a really nice, gentle voice and said, I will respect your right to listen to the movie if you'll respect my privacy. And so the guy got up and moved, and they didn't talk anymore. And that was how he felt.
Wow.
He was being really authentic, and that was something that was a new behavior for him because he would have never done that in the past.
That's great.
That's a fabulous story, and what a great message, because we get into so many times where we get adversarial because you talk about the football situation, and if you're talking to someone that, has been doing this for 15 years, it is all about how you approach it. Because if you just stop in one day and when I'm sick and tired of football, we've been doing this for 15 years and blow up, where are you? You've just created another hole in the relationship, which could have been handled a little differently. So use that example. How would you, if you were the spouse that didn't want to watch football all the time? You talked about doing a compromise, but talk about how you'd have that conversation with someone who's been set in their ways for 15 years.
Well, I'll let Marilyn answer that, but first I would say don't have the conversation during a football game.
Exactly. Yeah,
Great point, Chuck.
Yeah.
I love that. I'm all for the truth. So basically, I would maybe that morning, maybe the weekend before, maybe when they started doing commercials on football, I would just say, honey, seeing that commercial reminds me that football season's coming up again, and I'd like to try something new. I know you really love football, and I've been watching it all these years, but I finally realized I don't really like watching football, and I'm wondering if there's another way we can handle this. Either you can watch football with the guys, or maybe one weekend you could watch it here, one weekend you could watch it at Joe's house next door, or if it's about YouTube wanting to do things with them, it could be more, hey, if you're going to watch football all weekend, can we do something Friday night or after football season, just where you feel that your needs are also being expressed and met?
I think that I can second that, and the approach to me, if I were the football guy, would be the most important part. I can actually tell when Marilyn, just by the first couple words out of her mouth, is being authentic or she's a little bit upset. It's really easy. So the approach is the way to do it. And the approach out of love is the best way to do it.
All right. Well, I got to pop in here now. Okay, you guys specialize in relationships. What do you tell the people where, one or the other just doesn't get it? I mean, they're not tuned into the relationship.
You mean they don't even realize they don't want to watch football?
No, the other way. The person that the other spouse that they want to talk to just doesn't get it. Like, I don't know what your problem is. Go do something else. You don't want to watch football. I've been doing
this for 20 years. You married me. This is the way I am. You knew what you were getting into. How many times have I heard that?
Yeah.
And basically, I don't think you have to fight that. I think you just have to be the one that approaches it, like Chuck said, from a loving place. So your partner might say that. He might say, you know what, you knew when you married me that football's my thing, and I'm not really happy about the fact that you don't really like it. You've been lying to me. I mean, she might get even something that harsh back. And you can just say, you know what, when we first started watching football, I loved being around you so much, I didn't care what we did. And I still love being around you, and I'd like to spend some quality time with you doing something else. I really don't want to spend I don't even know how often football's on, every Saturday, every Sunday, whatever it is.
Monday,
watching.
Thursday.
Yeah, I don't know.
I have some friends that actually went through this whole thing.
Oh, wow. Tell us what worked.
Exactly. The way they worked it out after some fights, because it came in. Okay, Andrew, just to answer your question, football is on Saturdays and Sundays, Mondays and Thursdays with 3. So Andrew knows this stuff. They had many, many, many fights about it. And they finally came back where she came in and said, look, okay, Monday nights, you can watch every Monday night football game you want to watch because that's the night that I need to do my stuff and whatever. She has a list of things to do. She said Sundays, you love watching Sunday football, so you go ahead and do that. I'm going to make dates with my girlfriends. We'll go antiquing. We'll go this. We'll go that. They want sometime during the week that is just for us.
Good.
Yes.
And they actually came down. They now schedule 2 nights a week that they either go to dinner or a movie or both.
Wow.
And then they do, he does his Sunday football, she does her Sunday whatever that happens to be. He's got Monday night football, and she's got that's the night that she does some stuff some homework that she's got from her job or something. I'm not sure what that is, but it worked out really well for them. So it was not that he had to give up all of it.
Right.
And he got to keep his Sunday schedule. He just gave up some of his Saturday football, and then that's where the compromises come in, because Saturday is one of the days they go do things together.
And I think that's perfect. But like Cheryl said, I mean, he must have been a little bit willing to listen. And what I'm assuming, was he not or no?
at first he was not willing to listen.
Oh,
It was just like, how dare you? You know, I mean, my goodness, I've been doing this all this time. We've been married 30-something years, and here we go. But he loved her enough to step back away from the anger part of it. After a while, you know, I don't know how many times they had this conversation and it didn't turn out well, but eventually it did. And she did not go in the middle of a football game, you know, 2 minutes left on the clock, the score's tied, and somebody's driving for the end zone. She didn't pick that time to go have the conversation.
And even taking it to Cheryl's extreme, if the guy is really adamant and he's stuck there, we get the question all the time from people, my husband doesn't want to come into therapy, what do I do? Mm-hmm. And our answer is, if you change yourself, your partner will usually follow. So
exactly.
If she comes and has a conversation with him and he says no way, and then she starts going out with her friends and comes back and she's really, really happy, he might want some of that happiness.
Mm-hmm.
Well, you know, on that note, we're about to go to break. So when we come back, let's talk about working on ourselves and getting ourselves comfortable with the mess. We'll be back in just a few minutes.
And now back to Simple Steps, Real Change with Cheryl Maloney and Kenny Brixey on Empower Radio.
Welcome back, everyone. Just a reminder before we get started again with Chuck and Marilyn, you can call in with questions. If you have any questions for either one of them or Cheryl or myself, the number is 248-809-3475, or you can email a question in. Cheryl's watching that email for us tonight. That email address is simplesteps@me.com. Well, Marilyn, Chuck, before we left, we talked about, we said that we're going to be talking about getting comfortable in our own skin, you know, finding our own authentic self. If you're working with someone who just doesn't seem to be comfortable in their own skin, first of all, are they even capable of approaching somebody else with some of these problems that we were talking about? And if not, how do you help them get to where they do see their authentic self, or at least a little comfortable with that?
Yes, they can become more authentic, and the way they would do it would be baby steps. So, for example, instead of taking on the football example, they might say, it's really been bothering me for the last 10 years that you don't put the toothpaste cap back on. Would you please do that? And after a 10-year habit, she or he would probably have to ask that person multiple times, but they would have to do it in a way where they're coming from that place where I said Marilyn uses her authentic voice. It's a really loving place, and it's not one of fear, and you start very small, and it's a never-ending process. So I can't really say that there are totally authentic people walking around out there, because there's no end point. There's no end to the development of a human being. Everybody is continually peeling back the layers of the onion, you know, looking at the different petals on a rose. It just is a gradual step by step by step. And I know, Kenny, you were talking about how you started, and I can't even remember when I started, but I know it was very small, because I remember what I was like in high school, and I wasn't anything like I am now. So it was very slow, and I got a lot of help from people. People that were more authentic than I was really helped me. They asked me really nice questions. They asked, you know, why I was doing the things that I was doing, what was the motivation behind them. So that would be another thing that a person could do. Find some authentic people and hang around them. It does really rub off.
All right, this begs the question. I'm sitting here, Chuck, and I'm going to ask this question. Is if that started when you were young, is that what got you into the field of being a therapist? Because you were surrounded by people that were supporting the real you, the authentic you?
I just got flooded by a whole bunch of different answers. It was girlfriends. It was 7 brothers and sisters. It was starting meditation. They all kind of came together. And with the therapy part, I actually wanted to be a therapist when I got out of college, but I was not in the place where I could accept the fact that I was going to be a therapist. So I went back to school. I can't count really fast right now, but it was probably 10 to 15 years later. So that's how long my process took.
And it's an ever-going process, as you say, right?
It'll never end, ever.
All right.
Yeah.
So being authentic, and in your case, it took you years to get to the point where you knew you were going into this. But as you're dealing with folks that are trying to come into their authentic self, a lot of this has to do with their self-confidence. I mean, can someone be their authentic person if they don't believe in themselves?
Yes.
Okay.
And it's you instead of saying authentic or instead of saying your real self, you can say I'm going through self-growth, or because a lot of people in the 70s, it was not as much of a spiritual time as it is now. So it was the positive thought movement, or it was, positive growth. Everyone was trying to change, and there were a lot of different psychology theories that came out that said that you could do this and that and become more of yourself. But part of my process was reading a lot of those books, and that I did on myself. So if somebody didn't have those people around, they could go and get a lot of different self-help books and just read them and begin with some of the most famous ones because they're the ones that help the most people, and then keep what you like and let go what you don't like, take notes, do a journal, reflect on what's going on, and then as you grow, and I think both of you can attest to this, as you grow, you start to attract people of like minds. And so as you grow, more and more people will come to you, and they'll be like you.
Mm-hmm.
All right, that's what
okay.
Both of us thinking at this point in time. Well, all right, let's talk a little bit about the article that you'd written for our newsletter, of which we really love when you guys do that. Thank you. You said to start with some very simple questions about discovering the authentic you. For example, do you like being outdoors or reading a good book? Burgers and fries or vegetarian, that type of thing. And these questions get to the heart of our likes and dislikes. How do you help others understand that their personal taste is about honoring themselves and not about people or about people liking what they do?
Liking them, yeah. I love that. It reminds me of that Julia Roberts movie. What was that? Runaway Bride. Did you guys see that? Where she goes to get married, and every time she runs away before she can say "I do." I don't know if you saw it. It was a good movie. And when one of the things about it was that every time she had a boyfriend, he would want to make breakfast for her, and he'd make eggs. And when they'd ask, what kind of eggs do you like? She'd always say, whatever you're making. Like, whatever you like, that's what I like. And so she had like 6, fiancés that made eggs for her. And when she came to the second one, Richard Gere, the last man that she ended up marrying, he's like, what kind of eggs do you like? And she's like, I don't know, what do you like? And so she told him the story, and he made like all those different 6 kinds of eggs, scrambled and everything. And she finally picked the one she liked.
Eggs Benedict.
Eggs Benedict, yes. And that was the one, and that was the man she actually married. I mean, she actually made a choice, right? And so it's like the answer basically is you just have to go slowly. You have to be willing to be discriminating and honest with yourself. You can't just say, I'll eat whatever you're eating. There's not a wrong answer when somebody asks you, what kind of eggs do you like? And the same with other questions. It's not a wrong answer. It's just a preference. It's a choice. And like you were saying, Cheryl, if you're making a choice, you're actually honoring yourself. So you just ask yourself a simple question, do I like this? Or would I prefer something else? And that can be, again, like food choice, clothing, car, home, whatever. And when you're honoring yourself, you do honor yourself when you're being honest. And if you're actually having a choice and expressing that choice, you're honoring yourself and the person who's asking you, I think, which shows respect for you and respect for them. Both.
I don't know. I'm sitting here listing this. I've got a kick out of this. How many times, and I know you've heard it from clients, and I know I hear it all the time. Okay, I know Jack hears it. What do you want? I don't know. What do you want?
Oh, I know.
Whatever you want. okay, someone just make a decision. I mean, that's, for some reason, and it may be generational, I don't know, we've gotten to this point where it's like whatever the other person wants, I'm just going to go with it because it makes life easy, as opposed to honoring our choices and what we prefer to do. Do you run into that with clients? I'm thinking you do.
Constantly. I mean,
how do you get past that?
Well, I think, I really think that's kind of a question of self-esteem. I really do. It's like knowing who you are and trusting that the person you are is enough. It's, back to that same original question. You've got to start honoring who you are, and it really is discovery, because I think sometimes we don't know. I mean, there are times, obviously, Chuck might say, hey, do you want to go out and get a burger tonight, or you want pizza? I don't care, whichever one you want. I really just don't care.
Pizza.
But there are other times that you do care, and you should be able to say that. And we just get used to not doing it, I think. It's lazy. We're lazy.
Yeah, and because we're lazy, it's important to not fall into the trap of, okay, this time I answered burger, so next time is going to be burger, and the time after that's going to be burger. Your tastes change, your wants and desires change. So check in. It's kind of like this never-ending unpeeling process. Always check in with your, with your desires and your tastes, because they do shift. And honor yourself by knowing that. That's what makes everybody so unique.
Yes.
I'm going to throw in something really quick that doesn't have to do with authenticity, but has to do a little bit with the differences between what we found, men and women. Men, for the most part, want to be able to tell their partner, I would like to do whatever you would like to do because that makes you happy, and in making you happy, I'm happy. Women don't always believe that, but for most men, I've found that it's true. On the other hand, women get upset. They think that their men are being lazy or they're being wishy-washy, and they would like them sometimes to take a stand. And so, back to authenticity, this would be a conversation they could both have, because I know that when I've had it with a couple different clients, they've kind of had a realization and gone, oh, okay, you mean all I have to do is say, it's your turn, or it's your turn? I can do that. And conversations bring authenticity pretty quickly when you have them at that level.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think there are many, many times that men truly get pleasure out of doing what makes the wife happy.
Yes. Yes.
And I know I do.
I do too.
And it sounds like I'm just trying to be lazy sometimes, but there's a truth there. So,
all right, well, I've got to be the elephant in the room, because if I'm sitting out there going, okay, this is all for people that are all touchy-feely, not that we're not, but I'd be sitting there saying, yeah, I'm just going to do whatever she wants or he wants, because I just don't want the grief if they don't want to, if I want to do something. I think that happens a lot too. It's just easier to just do what they want, not necessarily because you want them to be happy, but you don't want to get into a discussion.
Absolutely.
But then is that the kind of relationship you want?
And that's a whole other story with a whole other show, isn't it?
Or I had clients come in where the guy will say, well, I want Italian. The woman will say, well, I'll do anything you want. And then he'll go, well, okay, I'll have Italian then. And she'll go, well, anything but Italian. And then they'll go on to the next one, okay, Chinese. Well, I don't really want Chinese either. Then what do you want? You can't have it both ways.
I read a story the other day that kind of goes along those lines. A couple got married, and about 2 years into it, the husband says, I really think you ought to get your hair cut. And so she got it cut from really long to really short. And then a few years later, something else happened, and he says, I think that you need to change your style of clothing. That just doesn't suit you anymore. And then a few years later, it's something else and something else. And finally, they walked into a relationship counseling office, and they said, we're ready for a divorce. And they said, well, why? He said, well, she's just not the same person I married.
Yeah.
So she was giving up her authenticity for what he thought he wanted, and I don't know whether that was a true story or not, but I loved it.
I love that story too.
So, well, let me ask you this: when someone is just really on the defensive side, and they're trying to protect themselves, rather than enjoying their life, it really seems exhausting. How do you help your clients realize that staying in that place isn't going to help them in the long run?
I have another client story where the trust was severely broken, and it created chaos in their life and made the people question whether or not they were going to stay in the relationship. But they did really, really hard work and did a lot of exploring and were very authentic, more authentic in the few months that it took than the 10 years before. It was that quick. And what they found was that, on the one hand, one of the partners would always swallow what he wanted to say because he wanted to avoid whatever, and the other partner, because of the way she grew up, was very quick to react, quick to give an opinion, quick to maybe even disagree. And when they started having these authentic conversations and they started realizing as they did it in the moment, they would stop and they would go, oh, this is what we were doing, this is what we were doing. And they went through the quickest change I've seen people do in a very long time. And I'm saying that because it can happen very, very quickly. Mm-hmm. The part about being exhausted is, again, when people come in and they're on their, let's say, last legs, and we ask them, well, did you talk about therapy before? Yeah, we talked about it a couple times a few years ago. Well, what happened? Well, nobody ever moved on it. Well, whose responsibility was that? And it's both people's, but someone has to take the first step. It's just always. So the person who wants to be more authentic or more real or more aware, use whatever word you'd like, we would hope they would take the first step and have the conversation coming from a loving place.
What you just said that comes to mind is that we get complacent in these relationships, and in that complacency, we allow it to fall apart because we're waiting for the other person to do something or say something, and if they don't, well, okay, it is what it is, and then doesn't that build up to an awful lot of frustration, and then you get that blow up, and okay, we're done, let's go on our separate ways. Okay, that probably wasn't a question, but I sit here and really wonder how long does it take someone to realize that if they don't take that first step, if they don't take the lead, it's not ever going to happen because they've grown comfortable and complacent.
Mm-hmm. Some people never realize that. Some people, the relationship's over. You know, they just don't realize it. They think their needs aren't getting met. They've never learned how to speak up, and they don't know why. They don't know what's wrong.
It's all about awareness, and if you don't, the spaghetti story, if you don't know that there's spaghetti sauce on the white cabbage, you can't clean it off. Right?
Personal story.
Okay, now you guys have to tell that story because it's so funny. Go ahead, Chuck. You have to tell it.
Oh, Marilyn tells it better.
It is funny. I tell my clients the story all the time when women get mad at their husbands for not noticing things, and women will say, oh, I have to tell him every day. Do I have to keep telling him for the rest of my life? And I'll sit there and go, you might, because men's awareness is different than women's. And we bought a house when we moved to Colorado, and it was brand new, so we got to pick the cupboards, and Chuck insisted on white cupboards. He did not want the natural wood. He wanted white. Like, why do you want white? Do you know how hard that'll be to keep clean? And he's like, no, I'll help, I promise. And so we used to make a lot of pasta then, and I would have these red dots on all of my white cupboards. I was like, Chuck, there's red spaghetti sauce, on my cupboards. And he's like, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't see it. And I mean, for years, and it had nothing to do with whether he loved me or not. He literally didn't notice.
So in answer to your question, if the guy does not have the awareness that he's really in that much trouble, then there's nothing he can do. And it's the partner's responsibility to say, hey, look, we are in serious trouble. When I say marriage counseling, it's not, I think we need a little bit of help. It's, I think we are in serious trouble. I'm worried about whether we can go forward or not. Whether I can go forward or not would even be a more authentic statement. One person is usually the mover and shaker in the emotional department in the relationship, and that's the person who needs to be authentic. They can't be afraid of offending the person.
I have a client, I'll never forget this couple, young couple. They were in their late 20s, maybe early 30s, one of the first couples I ever saw when we moved to Colorado. And they came in. She was an attorney. He owned a cabinet shop. And he was working a lot of hours in this cabinet shop trying to get it to be a success, you know, get it off the ground. And she would say to him periodically, "It would really be nice if you were home for dinner once in a while." And, I mean, she maybe said that 2 or 3 times. They came into therapy their very first session. They sat down on the sofa, and she looked at him and said, "I want a divorce." That was the first words out of her mouth, and I'm like, what? You know? And he was like, "What do you mean you want a divorce?" And she said, "I didn't get married to be home alone every night, and I've told you. I've asked you to please come home and have dinner with me." And he said, "Oh, my gosh." He said, "You've asked me maybe 2 or 3 times, made a statement it would be nice if I were home for dinner once in a while." He said, "If this were the deal breaker that it apparently is, why didn't you take me by the shoulders, sit me down on the sofa very hard and say, 'Look, if you don't come home for dinner, we are getting divorced,'" you know? And he really had no clue. And she thought she did all that was necessary. Mm-hmm. Just by mentioning it. That happens a lot.
Huh. She did herself a disservice by not speaking what she needed.
Absolutely.
As well, yeah.
But, I mean, I remember John Gray in the Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Venus group book had 2 pages, and one column said what women say, and the next column said what women mean, you know, by what they said. Because women do tend to say a soft sentence, you know, like, "Oh, wouldn't it be nice if we went out to dinner once in a while," when they really mean, "I'd like to go out to dinner Friday night."
Mm-hmm. And this is where a game that was taught to me a long time ago that I use with my wife has eliminated all of that. And that's when she says one of those things that, here's what she said, here's what she means. I always say, "Do you mean?"
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we get to the bottom of that real quick because I do not want to go somewhere else. Yeah.
And Kenny, how did you learn that?
I learned that through a seminar. It cost me about $2,000 to learn that cool little tool.
Wow.
But no, that's where I learned it there, and it was actually for just regular communication, and I put it into practice in my marriage, and I am so glad I did.
Yeah, well worth every penny.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, guys, it has come to that time that we need to let you guys cut out.
Oh, my goodness.
Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having us.
We always have so much
pleasure.
fun.
Oh, I know it.
And we know you will be back.
Yes, we will.
Definitely.
And we'll continue this conversation on, you know, we love having you here and just appreciate the perspective and all of the experience that you bring, because you bring the real life to our audience who's sitting there going, okay, how do I become the real you? So thank you both, and we're going to talk to you again soon, and have a fabulous sunny night in Portland.
Great, you too.
Thanks again.
Good night, guys.
Good night.
Oh, Kenny, every time they're on the show, it's just, one, the time flies by, but 2, you hear it from 2 folks that have spent the last 25 years working with clients, helping them become authentic and saving relationships if they can be saved. Mm-hmm. So as you walked out of that, now I know the "what do you mean" is probably one of the strongest things that we can teach anyone. I want you to tell that story, and so the listeners that haven't heard this before can understand how that phrase helps you with the communications.
Yeah, it's if I use the phrase, if I'm telling you a story and I tell you that they were tight, that has so many different meanings. That could mean that they were drunk, that they were very close friends, that they were stingy with their money, that they were in a really tight spot. I mean, those are just 4 that popped to the top of my mind. If I really want to know what somebody's talking about that says that to me, let's reverse this a little bit. If you were telling me a story and you said they were tight, and I really want to know what you mean, I can ask the question, do you mean, and I can give you my definition of tight. And you have an opportunity and a responsibility at that point to either say, yes, that's exactly what I mean, or no, I really mean it this way.
And what a great tool. And I know that you and Kathy use that on each other all the time. And that's what's helped you not have. And I love the fact that in your entire marriage, you've not had a fight because you ask each other those questions as opposed to making assumptions that then can go sideways.
Exactly. And the other part of that is just we just communicate openly. We don't play the games that we learned earlier. We were very fortunate. Right after we met, we were just dating before we ever got married. I experienced a seminar that she had experienced that taught all of these really cool tools on how to communicate and how to be your authentic self. So we got a very good boost before our relationship really got off the ground.
What a great foundation to start off on.
Yeah, but the cool thing about it is it's never too late. Get a coach, find a seminar, like Chuck said, find books, find a counselor.
Well, and I think those are all really good points. And, as we deal with folks and you're going, okay, I can't afford therapy, I can't go into this, but, there are some really fabulous books out there. One of the ones, as we were talking tonight, that came to mind is Andy Andrews has a book that's called The Noticer. And it's a book that talks about how to see things differently. And one of the examples is a married couple, and their definitions of love were very different based on how they grew up. But neither one of them had the same definition. So when one didn't do what the other thought they should, they thought they weren't loved. And it's simple things like that. And reading a book that helps bring that little bit of perspective into your life may make all the difference.
Yeah, it's communicate with your partner. Don't ever assume anything. Those are free things, and always just double check. Speak your mind lovingly, but double check. Don't assume that you know what your partner is saying or meaning. It is so important and so powerful. And also, Chuck had mentioned, or I think it was Chuck, had talked about the toothpaste cap.
Right.
The one thing that I add into that, instead of just going in and saying, this really bothers me when you leave the toothpaste cap off, one thing I add into it, because I don't want to send, especially if I'm doing this with my wife, I don't want to send her into a defensive position. But I will go in and say, I've really held back on this because I didn't want to hurt your feelings, but this bothers me. Can you try to change this habit? And we get that stuff out in the open. We don't let it go for years. If something happens that if I do something once that irritates her, I probably won't hear about it. If I do something twice that irritates her, she'll be in her sweet little voice will come in and say, honey, let's talk about this. And I know that that's something that I need to rethink.
That's such a simple message for people, is when one thing happens that isn't the way that you want it, you just go, interesting. And you notice that it's gone on. If it's something that becomes repeated, then it's like, all right, let's address this. Let's talk about how we can do this. And as you say, in that sweet voice, because when you come from a place of love, you can get everything accomplished. Well,
exactly.
Obviously, it is time that our show is closing down, so a big thanks to Andrew, our producer, and to the CEO, Brent Carey, for allowing us to do this. And on next week's show, Kenny is going to be otherwise detained, doing some other things, and our good friend Pam Thomas from The Attraction Factor will be joining me, and we are going to talk some more about improving your self-worth. Thanks, everyone. Have a wonderful week.
Good night, everybody.